Welcome to the Not Badger for the week ending May 7th, 2016. Here, thanks to our dedicated and loving slave pool, we have compiled a collection of funny, interesting, and hopefully useful clips from our most watched shows. Please feel free to take these nuggets of shit, pull the corn out, and find the gold and precious stones hidden within our ramblings. We begin our journey with Ragening number 32.
Look at that smug fucking smile. Ooh, she knows she's hitting below the belt. She's liking it. Nope. I think it's just you. Maybe you're just a hard bitch. I mean, if you're a hard bitch, everyone else will look more soft. See this smile? This is exactly your smile. I'm actually being more honest about it. You're trying not to smile. Because you know you're getting one in. You know you're hitting them right in the nads. You know it. And you're trying not to smile, even though you know it. I'm smiling because I just hit you below the belt.
Because there are women's studies classes dedicated to demonizing masculinity, so there's one symptom of a larger disease.
Actually, they're just demonizing men. Really. I mean, masculinity is... at what point do people just say, you know what? Manspreading, mansplaining, toxic masculinity, patriarchy, male privilege, rape culture, as only applied to male rapists, of course. All of these things, it's starting to sound less like you're demonizing masculinity, more like you're demonizing men. And furthermore, he for she. Feminists don't demonize the idea that men should save women, and should set aside their own problems to do so. Far from it. They just keep men in a continuous state of shame over being men, so that when they dangle the carrot of, hey, you can save us in this way, they do. Feel good about yourself. Continue to proselytize our belief system. Then you can feel good about yourself. And what do? They grab the carrot and they run with it to avoid the stick of mansplaining.
Who would have thought in 2016 we would be holding up frat boys as the last line of defense against an all-out pansy fest?
Good, you are a smug, contemptuous fucktard.
And this has nothing to do with sexuality, by the way. More so it has to do with the helplessness of today's young men. It seems few can change a light bulb, let alone fix a flat tire or change oil.
Well, geez. Definitely not being able to change a light bulb or a flat tire is the real problem with men today. Not the fact that women like you never stood up as their rights were being eroded away, but the fact that they can't serve you properly when you need basic tasks done around the house.
And that makes for pretty slim pickings for the females out there looking for a match.
A match? Huh! Listen to me, sweetheart. Listen to me. If you're looking for someone to change your oil and fix your fucking flat tire for you, that is not a match. That is an indentured mechanic. As a pre-packed newborn slave to serve your every need. No blood, no mess, just reheat. Ready to make your mashed potato comfort day glow road safe trainers, so your feet can take a rest from the struggle of the behest responsibilities of power. That does not match you, my darling. That is not a lock and key dynamic you're describing. That is a master-slave relationship.
Chivalry is all but dead, and so is manliness. And by the way, wearing a flannel shirt and having a beard doesn't make you a man if you still can't change a tire and you're scared of the dark.
Like, this is... all I'm saying is men aren't doing what I want from them now because of feminists. And incidentally, the feminists would say the same thing about you, internalized misogyny woman. I don't agree with that assessment, but that's what they would say. You're essentially saying men are not like I want them to be and I need them to be because of feminism, and feminists would say exactly the same to you. Too bad we can't get you both like some heavy weaponry and you can go fight it out in some muddy hellhole.
Rather than men always doing it. Yeah, none of you like the state of modern men. As you chain them to 4 wild horses and pelt them with fruit as they get violently quartered, none of you appreciate what they've become as a result of this. But you never fight amongst yourselves about it. You just let the men fight it out. Like fucking rock and sock and robots. We know you have issues, men, but there are women in the Middle East who aren't allowed to drive. So just go over there and frag each other until it's all sorted out, will you? What's that? We've blown up all the commercial vehicles, so now it's a moot point that the women can't drive. Who cares? Keep levelling the place. They hate women. Look at that. They won't even let their women leave the house. Come on, we have to keep firing shells higgledy-piggledy across the streets until they let their women out. There are very few people on the left or the right who don't reach the conclusion that those women over there need to be saved by these men over here. Well, I don't agree with all the wars we start in the Middle East, but look how oppressed the women are over there. We should be doing something about it. And feminists and anti-feminists alike both keep fighting with each other over who's not paying enough consideration to the plight of women in the Middle East. And then they both wonder why there's so many fucking wars. I could end all that grief overnight if I could just get it across to everyone involved that the Middle East has men who are also oppressed. Sometimes just as much as women and sometimes worse. Just like everywhere else. Because if they all truly understood that, then they'd all go, oh shit, I didn't realise. Well, in that case, it's none of my business. I'll get on with my life. And boom, you will have world peace. Unfortunately, that is not the response I get when I say men are oppressed in the Middle East as well. The response I get is... What are you, a men's rights advocate? That's why I think it's very important that I answer that question with a yes, that's how language works, rather than a no, sorry, I'll shut up about it now. Because that it's not just a lie, it is a spineless lie. A spineless lie that is standing directly between humanity and peace.
It seems like millennial men either don't have jobs or they're still using their parents' credit cards to buy us drinks at the bar.
You?
Oh, and for the record, I buy my own drinks.
You truly are an hero, Tommy. You're supposed to. Adults are supposed to buy their own drinks, and you're proud of being. I tie my own shoes. I brush my own teeth. Hang on, I'll do it with this, with this Steve Shives hot shoulder. I'll do it with game. Hi. I change my own diapers. I drive the choo-choo train by myself. Yeah, women are proud of themselves for buying their own drinks. After thousands of years of walking miles every day just to get water for their families, women are now proud of themselves for buying their own drinks. But men are the ones who've gone soft. Okay.
If your son thinks cleaning his room is a chore, that's your fault, not his.
Whose fault?
So whose fault is it? Is it our fault, ladies? No, I don't buy that. So whose fault is it? No man around. So whose fault is it? Fatherless homes and no male role models. So whose fault is it? Is it our fault, ladies? Because there are women's studies classes dedicated to demonizing masculinity, so there's one symptom of a larger disease. So whose fault is it? Is it our fault, ladies? No, I don't buy that. See, a real man knows how to handle a strong woman, so this isn't our problem. No. So this isn't our problem. No. So this isn't our problem. I buy my own drinks.
Okay. So Tommy thinks the biggest problem with men is that they don't serve her in the ways that she likes. Not the issues that they're facing legally with custody, with mental health resources, with resources. Of course, she's never going to acknowledge the idea that women are sexually or physically abusive towards men. That would not be. That's actually a man. Like that's the problem. The man is too much of a pussy, so she had to beat him or rape him. That doesn't even happen. Period. Like, no problem. Men face no problems except they don't appeal to Tommy. The only problem that men have in the world. I'm just trying to wrap my mind thinking that, and I guess it's sort of a symptom of doing a show in front of 8-foot neon letters of your signature. But Tommy is essentially saying that men's only problem in the world is that they do not appeal to Tommy. Guys, I guess you better get on that. As God knows, being saddled with Tommy is what you should all aspire to. Oh, I cannot wait for virtual reality and fully immersive haptic simulations, because that will totally cut the knees out of women like this. All right, the end.
Honey badger lifts the face off the puppet master, chews it out like a honey bastard, spit it out into your copy pasta. The honey badger.
And now we move along to Rantzerkers 54 and 55.
All right, let's start again.
It's about the same level as...
It's about the same level as me. Okay, good.
Wake up, sheeple. I'm Grant Forest Fire.
And I'm Jimmy Turner.
I take offense at that. I take because
Forest Fire.
Forest Fire.
That's really inappropriate.
That just seems to be like mocking the 70,000 Albertans who have just found themselves homeless because of out of control wildfires in the north of our province. So thanks very much, Grant. And thanks, Nuclear Family, for just poking a fucking open wound.
Of course, you could argue that they had no way of knowing in advance that this would come out around, just before an enormous fire that caused 70,000 people to have to be evacuated from a northern city in Canada.
Actually, it was a northern city and several surrounding communities, and not just forced to be evacuated, but, it's pretty much complete and total destruction.
Yeah. Although I did hear from an update that there is a group of what they call structural firefighters who've managed to keep the core, at least as of the evening yesterday. I was just...
Well, they kept the infrastructure, so they've kept the water treatment plant, and they've kept the one bridge out of town. They've kept those from being completely destroyed by the fire. But like buildings, houses, like some neighborhoods, 80% of the houses are already gone. The MLA, the member of the Legislative Assembly, was demanding of our premier, our provincial leader, to know why she slashed the wildfire fighting budget for the province by 80% in a budget that had record levels of spending and record levels of deficit spending and increased taxation. She slashed the firefighting budget by 80% just a month before this fire broke out, and he was asking her why she would do that hours before his own home was consumed. He was the MLA for Fort McMurray, and she accused him of fear-mongering and grandstanding. So it's lovely. It's a beautiful situation.
What has she paid for? What has she increased spending on?
She hired 2,000 new bureaucrats. She's increased health funding. She's increased social spending. She's increased budgets for women's shelters. She's increased pretty much everything that you would expect the most socialist party in Canada to increase. And she has slashed spending on tons of things that are actually vital to things like infrastructure, like, I don't know, fighting forest fires. So, yeah.
Yeah, when I heard that, I was just struck by the military terminology. They've held the infrastructure in Fort McMurray. Like, they're holding it against a encroaching army. That's astounding. And you got to know that I'm guessing every single one of them is a man.
Most of them are, yeah. There's some female journalists in that area. They've been trying to keep the airport from burning, so that if and when all of these people who are there as part of the emergency response team and part of the sort of the reporting on it, when they all have to be evacuated, there will actually be a way for them to get out, because there's not necessarily going to be a way on the road. There are literally some of, and I would suggest anybody go and look at some of the video footage and some of the photos. You literally had families, cars full of families driving down the highway trying to evacuate with, 100 feet tall flames, right? On either side of the road, on either side of the highway. And this is not a big highway. This is not a 3 lanes in each direction, I-5 type of highway. No, it's literally 1 lane in each direction. And these cars are essentially, 10 feet away from an inferno on either side and just trying to make it through, and hoping that, a burning tree doesn't fall right in front of their car, in bumper to bumper traffic where there's no visibility because of the smoke. So, I mean, it was literally, it really, the pictures look like they were shot in hell. And so far, to my knowledge, no serious injuries, no deaths. But there were some close calls. There was a woman in tears on the radio just this morning, saying, what the hell were they thinking having school in session today? My son was taken out of school on a school bus and evacuated from our town, which is not Fort McMurray, but close by, 1 hour before his school burned down.
Well, all I can say from this is that a lot of those people have probably been saved by the actions of the firefighters fighting this so people can get out at the risk of their own lives.
All the first responders, they had cops in there all day yesterday. They sent out the evacuation order, and then they had police and first responders and other emergency workers going door to door in a city of 60,000 to make sure that nobody had been left behind, nobody was stranded, nobody was bedridden and unable to help themselves, right? And also putting out spot fires within the city anytime they saw them, that, from the embers that are flying because the winds, what made this wildfire spread so fast was the high winds. And so you have embers falling on people's lawns and spot fires starting up in the middle of town from these embers dropping. And, so I mean, like, these guys are working and just like in these hellish conditions, trying to save as much of that city as possible and make sure that everybody gets out. And
well, Karen, let me finish my point. We have these men, and they are mostly men, guaranteed, who are trying to make sure that people can be evacuated and trying to salvage as much of the city as possible. But should any one of them be disabled or suffer either a psychological or physical disability through this and end up in a marginal position where they were homeless or institutionalized, the people who would advocate for them in that instance, when they are no longer the heroes of society but actually have vulnerabilities and issues that need to be addressed, we're about to see what nuclear family thinks of us, those people who would advocate for those heroes when they can't be heroes. When they have their own vulnerabilities that society needs to address and take care of. At the very least, in thanks for how they've sacrificed for us. Let's see what nuclear family thinks of us, who advocate for men when they can no longer serve and be useful and be heroes.
It's like they're implying that feminism doesn't have an agenda, when it clearly does. And any group that has an agenda wants their agenda to be portrayed and represented in every media that they can possibly do that. We feel that way. We have an agenda, and we want to spread our agenda to as many media outlets as possible and spread the word and get it in front of as many eyes and ears as possible. So, I mean, this whole idea that feminism has an agenda is ridiculous, and that their agenda would that they would try to push their agenda into every single aspect of society that they could, right? That's ridiculous is ridiculous. It's like stupid.
Okay, there's a psychological experiment that they did with rats. There's a natural in-group, out-group thing going on with rats. In other words, if you have a white rat who's raised with white rats, they will be sort of leery of spotted rats with black spots on them. Conversely, if you have black spotted rats who are raised with other black spotted rats, they'll be leery of pure white rats. And they did a test where they would have one rat with a lever and another rat trapped, and that lever would release the trapped rat. I don't know, they trained the rats to be able to know that the lever would release the trapped rat. Now, if it was a white rat raised with other white rats and they'd never met a spotted rat before, they wouldn't release the rat. They would not release the spotted rat. They would release white rats, but they wouldn't release the spotted rat. And if you did this reverse experiment with the spotted rats raised by other spotted rats with a trapped white rat, they would not release the trapped white rat. So you got this in-group, out-group bias happening depending on who you grew up with. White rats growing up with white rats had a bias against spotted rats. Spotted rats growing up with spotted rats had a bias against white rats. But then what they did is they would allow a white rat to get used to a spotted rat. So in rat terms, they made friends. And guess what happened? When a white rat was put in a position to free a spotted rat after it had become accustomed to that spotted rat, it did. If a white rat was raised with spotted rats, guess what it did? It would release the spotted rat whenever it saw that it was in confinement. What they are saying is that a basic psychological principle of acclimatization to another group doesn't apply when it comes to men. Men don't have the morality of rats, essentially.
Well, you knew they were thinking it, right?
And when I point this out to feminists and I say, after I go through my extensive explanation of why saying that men oppress women is disgusting throughout history, let's just go past illogical. It is disgusting for precisely what I just explained. Men grew up with women, just like that white rat grew up with spotted rats. And you're telling me the process of growing up with women, being raised by a woman, having a wife, having daughters, all of that will still lead a man to keep a woman trapped.
Well, I mean, why would he let her out? I mean, how's he going to rape her then?
And then when I explain all of this, I go and get into these long exchanges where they refuse to answer the question, do you believe that men oppressed women? I answered that question eight messages ago, and God. So yeah. Feminists won't even own it. They won't even own their agenda. My agenda is to bring about compassion for men when they cannot serve, when they can't be heroes, when they have vulnerabilities and needs themselves. Your feminist agenda is to tell the world that men oppressed women, and then women need reparations for it, against all understanding of psychology and history, and even just human morality and compassion.
They obviously just want attention that they're not getting, Jimmy, because they won't do anal, / won't do threesomes, / won't take my calls anymore because they're stuck up, Melissa.
These women were clearly asking for it. Literally, I'm pretty sure they asked him to take.
Did they actually ask him?
This is an imaginary scenario.
Okay, but the thing is, if it's literally true that they asked him, I could totally get like a whole drunken group of women screaming at a comedian, "Take it off!
Take it off! Take it off!" Yeah, no. And,
So
and the idea that like women with sexual hangups don't or that women with mental problems, and here's the thing, it's not necessarily women with sexual hangups, because there's plenty of women with sexual hangups who don't engage in any kind of, frivolous accusations against men or whatever, right? But there are women who are mentally disturbed, right? Who also sometimes have these sort of really deep conflicts regarding sex, because when you're mentally disturbed, like when you have borderline personality disorder or histrionic personality disorder, or any of one of these things that actually disproportionately affect women, often you're reading intentionality into situations where it doesn't exist. Sort of somebody steps on your toe and you take offense because obviously they meant to do that and it was an intentional slight, and things like that. So you sort of have this like highly overactive imagination going on that's sort of applying intentionality into situations where it maybe doesn't apply. And that leads to all kinds of sort of paranoid, I hesitate to call them delusions, but paranoid sort of tendencies, right? As far as when men look at you, a man is staring off into the middle distance on the bus trying to think of like what he's going to tell his mother as an excuse to get out of going to dinner. And she thinks, oh my God, he's going to rape me, right? Because the middle distance just happens to be somewhere near where she is, right? And so, I mean, like, there are women who are prone to acting out in extremely irrational ways, right? And those women are also prone to seeing other people doing things to them that those other people aren't necessarily intentionally doing, right? And we're not even talking about a huge proportion of the female population, right? So, I mean, like, maybe they did ask for it. Maybe lots of them asked for it. And then maybe she just figured, okay, well, his dick's ugly and he's wagging it in a way that I find threatening, and therefore, like, he wants to hurt me. I don't fucking know. I mean, like, you can't, this is really the fucking difficult thing about stuff like this, is that there are women who there are men and women, but women seem to be able to do this more than men do, or be believed more than men are when they do this, who will actually just make all kinds of shit up. I keep getting reminded of this woman who, there was a mailman delivering mail. It was a viral video. Mailman delivering mail in his little cart, right? And she went up to him and she videotaped him on her cell phone, and she kept on accusing him of stalking her and all kinds of shit. And she put it up online as proof that this mailman delivering the mail every day in her neighborhood was stalking her and wanted to rape her.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tables were turned, Jimmy, and say it was us accusing Dana Hornsby of exposing her large labia lips and flapping them in our direction. There would be no news stories about it. Why? Because the media always takes the side of women. Always.
Well, the media certainly doesn't really accept the idea that men can be not just like subject to visual, sexual harassment like this, but if any kind of physical. Like, it's a joke.
Yeah, pretty much. And honestly, like, even if you look at in the CDC, right? There's a in the CDC's NISVS. There's a category of sexual violence called non-contact unwanted sexual experiences. And this is one of the ones that, for men responding that, yes, they have had these, the majority of the perpetrators are male, even though the criteria don't necessarily exclude female perpetrators, right? But when you actually look at when you actually look at things like women flashing their boobs in a nightclub, lifting up their skirt, things like that, they're not coming into physical like very, very few men would consider that to like feel threatening. It wouldn't even necessarily form a memory of unpleasantness, right? It's not something that men would register as a threat. And so it would just sort of go down that memory hole of, experiences that just go away. They just disappear over time, right? And they would not necessarily, and yet at the same time, for a straight man, even just being hit on politely by a gay man might actually be unpleasant enough or uncomfortable enough for him to recall that on a survey that asked him if he'd had any non-contact unwanted sexual experiences. Oh my God, a gay guy hit on me. I was so uncomfortable, blah, 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 right? So, I mean, it's not necessarily the media. It's our entire psychology around sex and viewing women as not sexually threatening.
Pussy whipped white knight.
What?
Okay, just a reminder to our listeners that we're not gay, you are. We both fingered...
Speak for yourself. I like your radio voice though.
I don't know, but somebody, I didn't watch the video, but I did glance through the comments, and somebody commented that his glasses make his head look 10 times wider than it is.
What, is he deliberately trying to look unattractive or something?
I think so. But yeah, the whole thing with like gay. I mean, like some MRAs call each other faggots, whatever, right? Faggot has gone beyond the definition of like homosexual. It's just become this sort of catch-all. I mean, like even 4chan had to choose a new word for actual gay guys. They call them gay fags, as opposed to just fags. But but
essentially what's happening is a lot of these prerogatives have been just watered down to the point where they no longer apply to the groups that they originally applied to.
That's right. And like,
what the hell's wrong with that?
I don't know that there is, I mean, I wouldn't be able to venture that the MRM is less homophobic than any other part of society, or less transphobic.
Well, like, look at the statistics. I mean, there's a large number of gay and bisexual men in the men's rights movement, and then also the trans women.
Yep. Yeah.
And
no.
It's like there's I would venture.
I wouldn't venture to say that we're less homophobic or transphobic, but I don't think that there's any evidence that we're more or particularly homophobic or transphobic. I don't think that there's like a streak of homophobia running through the men's rights community. Maybe the sort of the weird pickup artisty community, right? Like the Rooshes, but even the Red Pill subreddit, which is like really fucking sort of traditionalisty and biologically deterministic and all kinds of things like that. Even they have, like they like Jack Donovan. They like all kind, like if you're smart, if you're telling them things that make sense and you're gay, so what?
Remember, all women lie, all women cheat. Our lives are being destroyed every single day. 9/11 was an inside job.
When they rise up against you, demanding higher salaries and yet another seat on the Supreme Court, only you can stop them. So don't believe the hype, because that only helps the feminist agenda.
Okay.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Well, at least it wasn't a hose of shit. Like, all right, if that's what we believe, okay. Yep. Actually, it's like the door knockers riddle. Remember that? Which one of us is lying, Karen? Because women lie. But I'm telling you, Karen is lying. And then you have to say that I'm lying.
Yeah, no. That doesn't, no, but The statement that all women lie, okay, doesn't mean that a woman is incapable of telling the truth. It just means that, because they didn't say all women lie all the time about everything. They just said all women lie. And, when I think about it, all women do lie. I've lied.
Yeah,
You've
all
lied.
men lie too. Yeah.
Yeah, everybody has lied. I mean, honestly, does my ass look fat in these pants? No, honey, it doesn't. Right? Everybody's fucking lied. Most lies are like social lubricant.
I think the problem is that they're mistaking. I don't know, maybe they are. I mean, it would be nicer if they could actually satirize us as we actually are. But maybe they're saying things because it seems like there's no separation between men. Women can lie and do, and all women lie.
Well, and there's just no difference between all women lie and all women lie about everything all the time.
Yeah, it's like the portion of the brain that recognizes that women are human beings, thus capable of succumbing to human frailties, seems to have been removed. And I'm wondering what that says about these people, that they go right from women are human beings lie, and if the government and the state facilitates those lies, you will see more of them. They go from that, and that would be true of men too. They go from that position, and they go right to all women lie, you hate women. And they can't, it's like women occupy two spaces in their brain. Either they are glorified goddesses with a morality way above men, or you're totally degrading them and hating them. And I really wonder what that says about them as opposed to us. Because for me, women are right square in the category of human beings. For these people, if you say women are human beings and human beings have human frailties, you obviously hate women. That sort of suggests that if these individuals recognize that women were human beings with human frailties, they would hate them. If women aren't functioning to model this divine goddess shit, these two individuals would hate them and regard them as being completely degraded and beneath any kind of human compassion.
And respect.
And respect. No, women are just human beings, guys. I mean, I thought that you were mocking us as a men's rights podcast, but here you have the most misogynist attitude towards women I've ever heard of.
Yeah.
Either they're goddesses or you hate them.
Yeah.
Either they're absolutely perfect or you hate them, and you insist on seeing them that way, as opposed to being unable to understand that women are human beings and still be okay with women. Still be like, yeah. Some women I like, some women I don't like. Women have shitty actions, some have good actions. They're human beings. Let's move on.
Yeah. Well, I was actually talking with Stardust briefly today, and he mentioned something about there's a lot of MGTOW who's sort of you're one of the Karen is one of the few anti-feminists that we respect type thing, right? And I was just like, no, that's not. Well, I mean, I suppose I'm one of the few female anti-feminists, that has any kind of profile that actually engages in this, that they like and respect or whatever, right? But that doesn't mean that I'm the only female that they respect. I mean, like, there is a difference between, like you can respect somebody for acknowledging their own limitations. You can expect somebody for acknowledging that they don't know everything. You can respect somebody for speaking with authority on the things that they do know about and saying, well, I don't know about that, this other thing. I think that even MGTOW have the capacity to respect women as individuals. It's just that it's just there is this sort of demand that by feminists that women be respected as sort of these infallible beings, and no, they're not infallible. And the way to get respect when you're an infallible being is to acknowledge that when you're a fallible being is to acknowledge that you're fallible, that you don't know everything, that you have failings, that you have blind spots, that you aren't, you know, the be all and end all, that you are not the pinnacle of morality. That's how you get respect, right? From other individuals. So I don't understand, like, what are they trying to accomplish here? They're literally setting women so high a bar that nobody could possibly respect them as much as women deserve, apparently, because women deserve respect as if they are infallible.
Well,
and they're
yeah,
not.
and then the reality, and then they're in a fight with reality, because women, regardless of how much you think that respecting women because they would never lie about rape, well, that's false. That's completely false. There's a reality here that you are denying, and you are now in a fight against reality to preserve women as these paragons of virtue, which they are not. Eventually, reality is going to come crashing down, and for a lot of people who believe in this paragon of female virtue, when reality comes crashing down, it just keeps crashing and crashing and crashing and crashing.
Yeah, no, and they really don't end up with a very good positive attitude toward women at all when the wool gets pulled away from their eyes.
When they stop being able to fight reality.
Yeah.
And they just get exhausted by their fight.
Finally, after 150 years of gender war, we have found a way to sow discord between the males and the females by actually convincing the men that a gender war has been going on for 150 years.
Not the Declaration of Sentiments. Not the Declaration of Sentiments.
And yeah, and actually it's been 165 years. Almost 170 years since 60 years since the Declaration, 70 years since the Declaration of Sentiments. And men are only now starting to actually go, you know, that kind of stings, ladies. Could you just stop doing that?
You stop saying that we oppressed you against all understanding of psychology and history?
You know, like, I think you're being unfair, right? This is what's sowing discord, right? Is the fact that men, after 100 and almost 170 years of gender war, right, since 1848, right, they are now saying, you know, ladies, it's kind of enough. And not all men. Plenty of men not saying that. Plenty of men are like, woo, go girls, right? But there's a group of men out there and women who are saying, ladies, it's enough, right? I mean, like, literally, they are looking at the metaphorical Western man lying on the sidewalk on his side, curled into the fetal position with his arms over his face, right? Covered in bruises, right? With a stiletto heel, right? Just embedded in his kidney, right? And they're just saying, ladies, haven't you had enough? Like, just, it's enough.
Yeah, like the rhetoric is now eerily reminiscent of stuff coming out of the Jim Crow South and Nazi Germany towards Jews and black people.
And the Rwandan media prior to genocide, yeah.
And if you look at the war propaganda posters, the shit that you're spewing, like okay, sorry, too much hyperbole. I apologize. This is not. I mean, even though that this is titled the Rantzerker, I realize that all of you do not like it when I scream and I engage in hyperbole. So let's not use hyperbole. All right. So the lovely propaganda being put out. No, is lovely hyperbole? Is that sarcasm? Okay. The propaganda. No. Oops. Sorry. Propaganda. The literature on gender relations being put out by feminist groups bears an interesting and compelling similarity to that put out for wartime propaganda against the enemy. So we now have all over the West what is essentially wartime propaganda targeting men.
Our own men.
Our own men. Yeah, that's a little, it might be time to just lay off that a bit. So that, maybe we should reconsider doing that. Because it's sort of gross. Oh, wait, sorry, hyperbole. It's not very polite.
It's tactless.
It's tactless.
It's
tactless.
It's
gauche. It's gauche.
But what I want to say is, okay, so they're saying that this gender war that was started by MRAs, okay?
Not by the Declaration of Sentiment.
Started by them being able to hoodwink men into thinking that there's a gender war and hoodwinking them into essentially launching. So basically they're saying that men are the aggressors in this, that they're doing a false flag campaign, right, to convince men to react to a perceived action on the part of feminism, a perceived hostility on the part of feminism. So feminism has not engaged in any hostility toward men, but this lizard operation covert thingy, okay, has tricked some men into thinking that feminists are hostile toward men, and men are launching a counter-offensive, and this is the initial act of the actual gender war, and the destruction of the planet, or the takeover of the planet, is what they're hoping to gain from this, distracting these men from their actual responsibility of protecting the planet. It's a divide and conquer tactic, so that men will look at women as their enemy or feminists as their enemy rather than the lizard people.
Okay, yeah, I think that's probably some sort of adequate plot. I would like to point out that feminists have been issuing rhetoric eerily similar to that of cultures at war, but directed at men since the very beginning.
Yes.
Saying things like they oppress us, that's right out of war propaganda.
Oh, yeah. No,
they hate us, right out of war propaganda.
They're privileged over us, and all of their privilege is unearned and undeserved, right? So
right out of war propaganda.
The privilege of child custody, right? That was just because penis. It had nothing to do with the fact that the father was 100% financially responsible for the well-being and support of his children, right? So then feminists went in and they tinkered with the law, and they fixed it so that women got default custody and men still got stuck with the bill. And that was fair because it's equal. It's 50-50, right?
Yeah.
You know, the woman gets the kids, the man gets the bill. They're both getting something, right?
Mm.
Yeah, no, it's like we're obviously against women's rights. And now I will actually fearlessly question things like, was women's suffrage a good idea, right? Like I want to know. I want to know, and therefore I want to look into that, and I want to consider the question, right? That doesn't mean that by asking the question, my a priori assumption is, yes, it was a bad idea, or or no, it was not a good idea. It's just that, like, I think that any question like that should be worthy of examination and investigation and interrogation. And I actually like being able to push the envelope in terms of what society might feel is acceptable to think about, right? What ideas they're prepared to contemplate. And so this is why Roosh's "We should make rape legal" article didn't irritate me at all. I was like, that's kind of an interesting, like, let me think about how that would work. Would that actually pan out that way? You know, like I literally just asked myself, okay, would it work? Right? I didn't ask whether it was moral. I didn't make a judgment on the idea as being bad or good or horrible or atrocious or misogynistic or anything like that. I just asked, okay, would this actually work? Would it reduce the number of rapes? Like, okay, so, and I think that that's a position that people have a real reluctance to accept, that somebody has no opinion on something. It really is like taking sides, making a judgment when 37 women come out and accuse some famous guy of sexually assaulting them or whatever, sexually victimizing them.
Well, it's like you have to take an opinion, and you can't acknowledge that you don't have complete understanding. And usually the opinion you have to take is of some authority that the individual in question agrees with. And it's like, no, I'm just going to recognize that I have limitations of knowledge here and just be happy with that. Yeah, I'm not even happy, but just feel content. Like, I don't fucking know. And it's not even my business to know. Yeah. As a citizen, it's my business to maintain, I personally believe, to maintain innocent before proven guilty. It's my business to maintain that. It's the accusation. It is the lawyer for the plaintiff. The what is that called?
Prosecutor.
The prosecutor's job. It's the prosecutor's job to determine guilt, not mine. So I'm just going to be remaining here in any specific case in the position of, I don't know. I don't think it's my job. It's not my job to know. It's not my job to form some sort of fucking digital hate mob towards defendants or even judge accusers. Like, I mean, we can speculate, sure, but at the end of the day, we don't know. I mean, even the jury doesn't really know. Nobody knows. All we know is that we can maintain rule of law, which benefits all of us. Due process benefits all of us. We can look at it in that terms. How can we make sure that the system runs in a way that's just and equitable? And we can talk about it in larger terms, in statistical terms, and how it deals with groups of people. But specific cases, no, it's like, the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. You can either know the speed or the position. In instances, it's just not, you just can't know. If we look at, for example, like abuse of horses, we know that horses are bigger than humans, and yet we still consider it abuse when a human expects or does things and beats a horse, even though the horse is bigger and could theoretically trample them easily. And the reason why, besides the fact that a horse is a horse, is because humans socialize horses. We train them to take abuse from us. We essentially, in not so many words, but we train them to take it when don't hit back when a human hits you. And that's what happens with men. I mean, in order for a man to physically defend himself, he has to go against training that he's had since birth or shortly after birth to not hit women. Most men endure, they get that kind of training. Like, hitting a woman is the worst thing. Hitting a girl is the worst thing ever. Don't hit girls. Don't hit women. And they get that kind of training. And not only that, on top of that or underneath that, there's a whole hormonal system that men have to prevent violence against women. Yep. Horses don't have that. Horses don't give a shit about violence against humans, but they're just trained to not. We punch them in the fist with a fist or whip them. They don't come back at us, even though they could, because they were trained. Same thing with men. Men are trained not to hit women, not to hurt women. And then on top of that, they have something that horses don't have, which is this whole endocrine system or hormonal system that responds to women's tears, to women's signs of distress by shutting the whole shit down.
Women have pheromones in their tears, in their emotional tears, that when men come into contact with them, their testosterone levels go down, their aggression goes down, and their libido goes down, right? So literally, when women cry, men become more gentle and more deferent to women.
Yeah, or just in general. It's like
Biologically.
Yeah. So there's on top of all the social training, there is the hormonal system that cuts a man off at the knees when it comes to violence against women. And when a guy is being sexually violated by a woman, he has to fight against all of that and justify to himself hurting her versus just submitting. Now that's more psychology than it is raw physical violence, but psychology can fuck you up. It can. Yeah. I'm a living proof that psychology can do some fucked up shit to you. Just in your head.
Is penis worship at the root of the bogus notion of fetal personhood?
No, I don't think so.
I don't. Like, seriously, like, when I read that title, my first response was like, what?
Because of the codger, this feels less like fishing a turd out of a sewer and more like opening a chocolate bar. And it's only because of the codger. It's like he makes every stupid thing better.
The notion that life begins at conception is a variation on a very ancient and very sexist cultural theme.
Okay. Actually, I read that that's actually very recent. And that even if you look in the Bible, life was supposed to begin at something called the quickening, which was, I think, several months into pregnancy when the woman...
It was about 4 months into pregnancy when you get those sort of ginger ale feelings in, your belly. The very first moments that you can actually feel the baby kick, that would be what the quickening would be probably referring to. There are some cultures where you don't even name the kid for a year because for a year you still don't know whether this is like a viable thing, whether you can expect that you're going to have a child at the end of a year.
I'm slow sometimes. But after years of writing about abortion rights, it finally occurred to me that life begins at conception is one more version of a multi-millennial infatuation with the penis as symbol and proof that manliness is next to godliness.
What? A citation, please? I'm pretty sure that the penis is not something that necessarily people worship.
I'm pretty sure that there probably wasn't a whole lot of talk about God's wang in the Bible. You look at the cultures that did actually, they didn't deify the penis, but, like they kind of liked it, they admired it. They sometimes had festivals of penises and vaginas. They had artwork extolling the virtues of the penis and the vagina and things like that, right? Sometimes they valued the penis more, maybe, I don't know, but most of those cultures, they also had a concept of God as imperfect. The Romans, right, and the Greeks, they had a concept of gods who were hubristic, immature, mercurial, finicky, selfish, envious, all kinds of human flaws. The cultures that actually celebrated the penis were cultures that did not see godliness the way this woman is portraying our idea of godliness as this perfect, all-knowing, all-loving, omnipotent, always right. God is always correct. That didn't exist in those cultures. The gods did some fucked up shit back then. And they weren't really that great. Sometimes it was just like, this god wanted to bang your wife, so tough shit.
Let's not forget, for every Jesus statue, there's also a Mary statue. For every praise Jesus, there's 10 Hail Marys. And what's Jesus famous for? Dying. What's Mary famous for? Her magic vagina. So... yeah.
I think with Christianity, the penis got a pretty bad rap, which would explain why when Christian societies encountered Roman statues, they just started to cut those inappropriate bits off with a chisel. The Romans did actually have a cult of the phallus as the center of Rome, but that's over 2,000 years ago. Our society isn't exactly like that. I don't see parents taking the bed sheets of their teenage boys after they've ejaculated in them and running around saying, "My boy is a man now."
On the surface, conservative, evangelical, and Catholic insistence that life begins at conception appears to be aimed at elevating the status of fetus over women. But just beneath that surface, what it elevates is the status of the penis.
Okay, no. She's conflating two completely different things. One is whether a fetus at conception is alive, which it is, and the other is whether it's a person, which very few people, I think, will actually say, this is a person. I mean, you have to go pretty far to say an anencephalic child, a child with no upper brain, just the brainstem, absolutely has nothing in there. You wouldn't bestow personhood on somebody who does not have any higher function whatsoever and who's just a body. Alive versus personhood. And she's just kind of smooshing them all together into this kind of soup. It's a slurry of nonsense. And at the end of which she says, penis.
How did penis get in here? Like, to assume this, you'd have to assume that the woman plays no part whatsoever in conception. And that's not true.
Remember a couple years ago there was that stupid state rep in wherever the fuck, United States somewhere, who proposed a bill that would outlaw vasectomy and masturbation or something like that for men because it was the exact same thing as abortion. Allowing all those sperm to die was the exact same thing as forcibly terminating a fetus. And I'm just thinking to myself, okay, so basically what you're saying is every time a woman has a period, that's against the law. She's committing a criminal offense, the way every man who spills his seed on unfertile ground is committing an offense. It's the exact same thing as killing a fetus. They seem to, they just, there's no fucking ability there to see these differences in category. It's bizarre. It's fucking bizarre to me.
The only constant seems to be that women are victims.
And anyone who has one.
So it's the elevation of the penis in anyone who has one. Okay.
What creates the wonder of a new person? Forget about the maturation of germ cells and the 9-month labor of a woman's body and the painstaking parental nurture. It's a sperm! A penile projection shot forth by the ultimate organ of demi-divinity.
Even at the beginning of conception, the woman's body is not doing nothing. The egg actually makes chemical things to affect the outcome. So there's no idea that the conception doesn't include a woman. And in order to advance this notion, you have to exclude women's biological agency, their body's own activity. And then she turns around and blames us for removing women's agency when she's doing exactly that to turn them into a victim of penises.
I actually saw some very interesting footage. It was extremely interesting. I forget what series it was. Maybe The Naked Ape. But they actually went in with a fiber optic camera during sex, and they showed an internal view of the woman, and then she was, his penis was out of there, she was stimulating herself to orgasm, and when she orgasmed, her cervix went into a kind of spasm that repeatedly dipped it into the puddle of semen over and over and over again, which is facilitating fertilization.
It's not a passive act on the part of women, but she's making it out to be. If conception doesn't make a child, but labor and birth, well, how about the 18 years of resources to get a child to reproductive maturity? Does that count? It just seems so arbitrary.
Sperm penetrates egg, and voila! A person, a new soul. All the extraordinary and unique value we accord to human life is created instantaneously.
To asexual
3
reproduction.
millennia of penis.
I'm sorry, but the mere idea that we value the male's contribution more than we value the female's biological contribution, that we value his teaspoon of ejaculate more than we value her finite number of eggs and the rental space in her uterus, for which men have for millennia paid with their blood and their sweat and their tears in order to essentially rent that space. They have had to promise, yes, I'm going to pay for this woman for the rest of her life. That's how men got access to sex. Now, to think that that teaspoon of ejaculate is considered superior to what the woman contributes biologically, the minimum biological investment on the part of the woman, when men have been forced to pay for it with a lifelong commitment to put food on the table and a roof over her head.
Yeah, there's not much a woman is asked for in exchange for his access to his ejaculate, his baby batter, as it were.
Once notice, the pattern is inescapable. Our ancestors thought that the penis was literally divine. Dharmic cultures worshipped it by whacking stalactites and stalagmites out of caves, and air roots off of trees, and carving phallic shapes out of granite by the thousands.
That's one thing about the penis. It's very easy to carve. It can't really be said about a vagina.
Abrahamic cultures took the opposite approach. And
This is so funny.
insisted the penis was so precious and powerful that it couldn't be seen, even in art, and had to be chiseled off of statues, or at least covered with fig leaves.
Oh my God!
Yeah.
So the fact that they disfigured Roman statues is indication that they prized penises so much. That's why they took the depiction of the penis and broke it apart.
Yeah, and they hated titties. That's why they left them in there.
It's like no matter what you do, all roads lead to the conclusion.
Yeah.
If they leave the penises on, obviously they worship the penis. If they take them off, obviously the penis is so holy nobody can look at it. I think that you are winding your way to an already predetermined conclusion. And I think we all know what that is, and that is that women are victims.
They also insisted that a man's magic wand could permanently transform a female from one kind of being to another, from a prized virgin into a worthless whore.
But that's not about how much they love the penis. It's about how much they didn't like it.
And a black person's company could transform a proper white person into a nigger lover. But that is that's just evidence
of how much we love niggers.
Jesus Christ. And for anybody who's listening here, we use that in disgust at the whole concept that the company, or even the intimate company of any group, transforms another group into a depraved shadow of itself, of its worthless object of its former self. But that doesn't mean that the group that's being transformed by the other group's company, that doesn't mean that they're the ones that who are ultimately being insulted. Blackness wasn't a magic spell.
Or that's something that we worshipped. We worshipped blackness. We admired it so much, and we hated women so much, and we loved blacks so much that the moment that a black man and a white woman had sex with each other, she was transformed into something awful because his dick was just that powerful.
Okay, I just wanted to point something out from what you said because something clicked in my mind. Once again, and this is a feminist, this feminist is advocating an argument in which black men are on the apex. If men's magic wand is what transforms a woman from a virgin into a whore, and that's just an evidence of how powerful and special and how much we worship the male penis, then the fact that black male penises are considered the most powerful wands means that, once again, feminism has put black men on the apex of this particular privilege. That's fucking amazing. Think about it.
Maybe she watches a lot of BBC porn.
Oh, big black, yeah. Oh, maybe she does. Maybe this is her own private worship.
With petite white girls.
Do you happen to know about the amazing change that happens to a man's identity if he's caught fucking a goat? Does that mean we all worship goats?
Good point. All right.
In medieval Catholicism's recipe for sexual hang-ups, the prior touch of a penis, or lack thereof, became the most defining aspect of a woman's identity.
I know, because she started off clean and he started off dirty, and then he put his penis in her and rubbed some of his dirt off on her, and then she became dirty. He couldn't make himself less dirty. He's just inherently dirty. Right? So he can't transform. He can't transcend that. He's just harming his sexual partners. He's dirtying them with his dirt, with his filth, with his nastiness, with his baseness. He's pulling them down to his level. Do you even listen to yourself? Did you have anybody proofread this before you put it up? What the fuck?
Right, and I'd like to add that the Untouchables are named the Untouchables for a reason, because they have such incredible power to degrade other castes by their very touch. Obviously, the Untouchables are on the top of the hierarchy, and once again, I have to note that the penises, most of the Western history, were considered the most degrading, the most powerful in turning a woman from one state to another, tended to belong to minority men. Yes, this is what feminism gives minority men. What about the white woman's vagina's ability to transform a black man from alive to dead? Or a man of any lower class from alive to dead? I mean, because if we're going to argue that point, we're going to argue and say, well, penises changed women from virgins into women who went to the nunnery to give birth. If penises changed women into that, then vaginas also changed certain marginalized men, or even just the idea that they could access those vaginas that they weren't supposed to, also changed marginalized men from alive to dead.
Oh, no longer a whole person. The same magic wand that made her valuable could also do the reverse.
When did it make her valuable? Oh, that's right, when it allowed her to live. Yeah, it's sexual organism, not asexual organism. It didn't make her valuable. It gave her half of her genes. Unless it's a test tube baby, in which case you might as well say the egg smothered the fucking sperm. There was no penetration involved.
It made her viable as an adult. This penis is paying for the roof over your head. It's paying for the food in your belly. It's standing outside the house, fending off marauders. It's performing back-breaking, strenuous labor out in the fields with no bug spray or sunscreen for 16 hours a day. And it's doing all of this. This penis is doing all of this for you to earn its way into your valuable vagina. Doesn't even know her vagina has value. It has enough value that it can command that the man do the work in order to even be able to have access to it. And the man is not giving her value. She has that value, right? And the only way that she cannot be seen as having damaged her value is if she gives it away for free, right? Okay, this is really the hilarious part. Or if she gives it away for a single payment, or if she's a prostitute. So she's giving it away for free. She's not charging for it. She's not charging a lifetime of support and protection for it. Or she's charging for it, but, just a pennies on the dollar compared to what she could get. That's when she's seen as losing value, because she could charge so much more.
Let's now tell Will Wheaton to please be silent with Polecat Cast number 59. A very prestigious and famous actor from parts unknown, known as Will Wheaton. Will Wheaton. And Will Wheaton wants to mansplain to us.
That's so weird, Hannah. It didn't matter to you as a woman? It didn't matter to you?
It didn't matter to me. I can identify with characters of either sex without caring whether they're the same sex as I am. It's weird. There must be something wrong with me.
I'm hearing a lot of strange things.
Soggy knees.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot of strange things come out of your mouth right now, Hannah. I don't know if I'm okay with them.
People tell me that all the time.
You actually have some kind of incredible superpower that you could allow yourself to enjoy a piece of media without feeling as though that media has to conform to your insecure needs. Unlike the rest of us that are all, especially us men, whenever I watch a movie, I need to know that I can relate to the character that's in it. That's why he always has to be male.
That's what you have to do. Yeah. What you have to do is you go find a pool full of water, and you get into it until it's up past your knees. And then you're fine.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say like go drown yourself in a pool of water.
No, you just
And then
have
you won't
to
have
get
any more
your
problems.
knees-
I was like, yeah,
just have to get your knees soggy and you'll be fine.
Okay. Is anybody else seeing those 4 marks on Will Wheaton's left arm?
Yeah, he's a cutter.
I was getting ready to say, is he
What the heck?
Will
It
Wheaton's
makes
a
you want to
cutter?
see up close what exactly is that.
Oh my gosh.
That's actually how many years old he is in the
Oh.
man-child alert. I'm serious.
Oh.
You can't see it here, but he actually has a tint of blue in his hair, and he's got this like, what is that? Like, is that like a Fallout Boy haircut he's got going on? I don't know what he's going for.
Oh, here, there's more for you. There's that Ghostbusters. But that's okay. Maybe
Pause it.
Rogue One is gonna.
Ghostbusters was shit. The most universally panned trailer ever made. There's like articles written about it.
Isn't it the worst rated video on YouTube currently?
Yeah, it's like it's the worst rated video on YouTube, I think. Or it's definitely the worst trailer. Nobody wants to see this movie. Nobody. And the people who do, they're going just because they feel the need to support it. But they don't know why they're doing that. They don't really even understand why. That's going to be the most awkward theater. There's going to be like 10 people, and they're going to be hoping that no one like recognizes them, and they're going to be hiding in their popcorn, and they're going to be wondering, why did I do this? I mean, unless the movies come out and they're amazing, no one's going to see that fucking movie, Will. It's got nothing to do with the fact that they're women. It has everything to do with the fact that it looks like shit. Okay.
And this goes back to that pandering thing. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of women pissed off at the idea that they made this movie just to have women in the Ghostbusters, rather than to make a good movie.
Mm-hmm.
And if the movie sucks, that's just going to make it even worse, because it's going to be like, well, if we just throw some shit out and we put women across the top of it, then it's something good, right? No. It's not. Just because you add women to something doesn't make it better, and it doesn't make it pro-woman.
No.
It becomes an insult to everybody.
Yeah, I was getting ready to say, at what point does it become condescending, and at what point do people become aware of that?
It becomes condescending the minute you do it because of their gender.
There's so much fucking toxicity around the idea of doing this that no one wants to do it anymore. But once upon a time, in old Hollywood, there was never a concern that the people playing a certain role had to represent that role exactly accurately in terms of the race or, I mean, oftentimes they did for the gender and stuff, but when it came to like the race or culture or ethnicity, they weren't concerned with getting it absolutely right. Many of the most popular Westerns were made in Italy and had a lot of Italian people in them. But nobody said this is wrong and there shouldn't be Italians in a Western, or at least it shouldn't be dominated by Italians, right?
Why are these Dagos taking good American jobs?
One time, John Wayne played Genghis Khan in a film. One time, who's the guy who played? Was it Lawrence of Arabia? There are. I think that this is a really great example. There was a conversation once between Dustin Hoffman and Sidney Poitier, and Dustin Hoffman was a method actor. So, he was big on trying to replicate in his real life experiences that he was supposed to be playing out in a film. I know Max knows a lot more about film than I do, although I do love movies. But another example of a method actor would be somebody like Viggo Mortensen, who he basically didn't shower for like the entire time he was filming Lord of the Rings because he wanted to live like Aragorn so that he could like better get into the role. Right. But anyway, Dustin Hoffman was making a movie with Sidney Poitier, I believe, and Dustin was talking about all of the ways in which he got ready for the role. Now, Sidney Poitier looked at him and he said, "Why don't you try acting?" And so what he meant by that is really quite simple. When you are playing a role, it doesn't matter that you're not the exact type of person, either by race or age or whatever, to play the role. When Charlton Heston played Moses, people did not give a shit that it wasn't a Jew. You know, they didn't. I mean, like, you know, they were just like, we think Charlton Heston is a good actor. We want him in this movie. When they got like Edward G. Robinson? The guy in, yeah, see that guy? He was in the Ten Commandments as well. That guy's not the guy to play that character. In fact, Edward G. Robinson played a lot of mobsters, but I don't think that his background fits in. These things don't matter. I mean, like, they don't, but they do now.
I actually take issue with his description as of non-sexualized as being part of strong, and as if a woman is weak when she's sexualized. Has he like never heard of any of the women in Hollywood? Does he not know that there are actresses that make their living taking their strength from being sexualized?
No. See, but that's bad. Like, they have internalized soggy knees.
Did Mae West not exist? I mean, come on.
There you go.
That's like the greatest power, and for the most part, only women have it. Maybe that bothers him.
Ooh, he's jelly. Will Wheaton is jelly. Oh, shit.
And also, by the way, Arnold Schwarzenegger was never considered sexy. Because he was strong. He can't be both of
Never.
us.
By nobody.
There we go.
Nobody ever thought that.
Never
ever.
Sexualized.
No, definitely not.
He just wore Speedos, you know, because that's all he could find.
Yeah. It was laundry day.
Yeah.
All right, let's.
Hey, Chad, if you can do me a favor, can you please let me know what is best in life?
Well, one last thing about Will complaining about like white people in entertainment. You know, Will, are you talking about the entertainment industry that's essentially mostly liberal and mostly left wing? That's actually as fucking as committed to the same ideas as you are? That group? Because maybe you should be looking in the mirror if there's a problem.
Yeah, I was getting ready to say, when is Will Wheaton going to give up his spot on his next appearance on The Big Bang Theory to, let a person of color or an underprivileged woman or somebody that's handicapped or somebody like that? When is he going to give that spot up to somebody? Because I mean, he's a white man. He's the problem.
Yeah.
So he needs to be a good ally and step aside and let somebody else take his place.
Yeah, I want to be an actor. I'm not good. But you know what? That doesn't matter. We need more Puerto Ricans. I already told you that there's 2.
Exactly.
I think we need more.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Fucking practice what you preach, man. That's what I'm saying. Fucking inconsistent ass people like this. It's like, oh no, everybody else should do it. Me? I am special. I don't have to apply the same rules to myself as everybody else does because I'm Will Wheaton. Oh, when I say don't be a dick, oh, no, I didn't mean, not me. I mean, I'm going to be a cunt. I'm going to be a total asshole. But you guys, don't you guys be a dick, though.
You know, this instance has made the news, and there's in other instances that have made the news. But I know guys that are going through stuff like this now, where they're keeping their heads down at their universities and trying not to rock the boat they're in by upsetting the wrong woman or upsetting the wrong social justice warrior. Guys who want to see like men's organizations on campus, so there's at least some support for men who are going through things that maybe women don't understand because we're not men. You know, maybe we don't understand the way it feels like to go through those things as a man, as opposed to going through them as a woman who's supported by all of society. And they don't have maybe the all of the resources that Sage had, which Sage had. You know, his resources were us, the men's rights community, and a voice for men, and Honey Badger support. You know, that it wasn't that he was rich or that he had some great resource on campus or that there was anything local that made things easy for him. He still had to fight like hell to get what he got. But a lot of these guys have nobody. You know, they have maybe 1 or 2 friends that are interested just the same way they are, and they're afraid to start anything because they're afraid it'll destroy their academic career and later their prospect for an actual career. And this has got to stop. You know, this is absolutely discrimination. This is happening because they're men. It's not happening because they're mean. It's not happening because they're unpopular. It's not happening because they're saying the wrong things or they have the wrong beliefs. It's happening because they're men. Women are allowed to be mean or unpopular or have the wrong beliefs and still go to school without getting harassed. In fact, if they get harassed, they have all kinds of tools to fight it. Men need to have the same thing.
You are going there to find experience, you're going there to find training, you're going there to find wisdom. And what we have right now is this knee-jerk reactionary society that is so afraid of the next controversy or non-controversy, as it were, that they will do stupid shit like this. That they will silence people's voices because somebody's fucking butthurt about it. And this is not what an education system is. This is I must imagine that people outside of the United States are looking at the prosperity and the privilege that we have by being Americans, the freedoms that we have, and they're like, wow, these people are so lucky, but they're so fucking stupid. They're pissing it all away. It's like, it's like some people, like there's the story about the little kid who made a trash bag jersey because he loved this Lionel somebody or another. It's this, this soccer player guy, football player, if you will, if you're across the pond. Yeah. You know what's funny though? On a totally, well, not a totally unrelated note, but a somewhat related note. All I gotta say is, motherfucker, get good, dude. I never got caught when I used to fucking do graffiti, and I did a lot of fucking graffiti all up and down the East Coast. Motherfucker, you need to step your game up. So.
That's your privilege talking. That's what it is.
Yep.
Because they were like, "Oh, he's white." It's carry on, citizen. Yeah.
Capricious youth. Oh, look at him. He's adorable. Oh, little cheeks, little blue-eyed devil. Love you.
Yeah, it's fine. No, but one thing I want to throw in there too, when it comes to virtue signaling. Virtue signaling is not virtuous. It is the illusion. And when I see instances of this, it is essentially people trying to make themselves into martyrs so that the narrative can be kept alive or it gets them attention or whatever. But these are we're talking about someone who is arrested for vandalism. Why is this a gigantic story? I mean, I'm not saying that this sort of thing. When you really think about it, it should be something that no one can talk about. But the climate in college campuses is so toxic that even little things like this become like headline news. But go ahead, Hannah.
It wasn't even cool graffiti. That's that's the shitty thing. If it was shitty graffiti, but if you're going to fuck the police, be sure to wear a condom, just as a courtesy to them. That's they don't deserve to get stuck with your child support.
This one guy posts a video of the KKK, and they're like shouting in the woods and burning crosses and shit, right? And it's like a recent one supposedly, and the guy's like, for anyone who believes that racism no longer exists in America, and I'm like, who the fuck says it doesn't exist? I mean, like, what? First off, I was like, why are you even here telling us this thing that we know exists? What? And he's like, you're just denying the fact that, and they're in like all positions of Congress. And he basically went into this conspiracy thing about how they're in Congress and they're in the police and they're like everywhere. And I'm like, the KKK is a fucking joke. I mean, I'm not saying that we shouldn't point the finger at them and say, look, laugh at those people because they're not, their ideas are bad. But come on, man. I mean, who the fuck feels that racism doesn't exist today? Of course it does. There are lots of forms of bigotry, and they're not limited to the United States. They're all over the world. Farron Meyer, who was a trans MRA that's been on our show a few times, comes from South Africa. She experienced racism there, but no one's going to talk about that. If you're someone who's in a certain part of China and you're in the wrong part of China, you're going to experience bigotry. If you're not in the correct level in the caste system in India, you're going to experience bigotry. If you're Korean in Japan, you're going to experience bigotry. It doesn't matter. It happens all over the fucking world. Why is the U.S. always like the one everyone's... There are people who have like this incredibly crazy-ass notion that if you just go like, I don't know, south of Chicago enough... They're just KKK guys just walking around. No.
You mean there's not?
No. This doesn't happen. That's sort of like, well, I mean, I live in Chicago, and people think there are shootings going on all the time, that I have to dodge bullets, and I get stabbed like every day. That doesn't happen.
Like, you know, they're just creating these narratives. I mean, I hate to keep beating that word. It's like, you know, we're always talking about narratives and stuff, but it kind of comes down to that, where they're constantly reinforcing these narratives through emotional calls to action, instead of actually, you know, talking about facts like, oh, the pay gap, women are paid less. Well, why are they paid less? Oh, that's not important. They're paid less. It's just conspiracy.
Let's bring out some weepy young ladies to talk about their stories. Here's a BuzzFeed video.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it's the woozles that won't die, the zombie woozles.
Yeah, there you go.
You shoot them in the shoulder and they keep coming. You knock the legs out from underneath them. You disprove everything about them, and you keep hearing them over and over again. Yeah. And they just won't die.
Yeah, it becomes fact. If it's repeated enough, it becomes fact. That
or
is,
at least
they
it
create
becomes
their own
perceived as fact.
Yeah. Yeah, because when you're dealing with low information people that don't ever actually look any deeper, sadly it kind of does become, you know, quote unquote, become fact. So
yeah, they're more like zombie parakeets or zombie ravens.
Well, that's
they're just or you know, zombie crows that just all they know is how to repeat like the same old, you know, 1 and 4, you know, and they just keep.
You know what a woozle is, right, Brian?
Yeah, it was a thing from. Wait, I was thinking about Winnie the Pooh, but
yeah, no, a woozle is a belief that is taken as fact, that you've heard it so often that you just take it as fact. You believe it because it's what you learned, and it can be, you know, like, you don't know where you got the source of it. You don't know where, you know, like the 2% like the 2% thing on false accusations, where Brown Miller was the one that actually claimed that only 2% of accusations of rape accusations are false. And that was a woozle. The feminists have repeated it for so long that if you ask 1,000 feminists where that came from, 2 of them might be able to tell you. That's a woozle. But there are people who are going to get horribly upset if they find out that the majority of rape victims isn't women. And then they're going to be terribly upset if they find out that perpetration is not uniquely male, much less that there's actually a significant portion of perpetrators indicated to be female. You know, there are people whose whole outlook on life would be wrecked by that. There are people whose whole outlook on life is wrecked when they find out that domestic violence is a two-way street most of the time. You know, that's something that they can't handle, that information. And that's why they end up rationalizing. You're not going to run into as many people that are going to have to rationalize a new definition for round and the world because of Christopher Columbus. It takes an emotional attachment and a degree of hatred to want to redefine rape and sexism and racism to make yourself exempt and everybody else guilty.
You thought we were finished, but we're not. We are also going to add in Fireside Chat with Focus Break Habib. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your channel and what it is that you do. Like, why do you think you're on this show, basically?
I still don't know. I mean, I just started my channel like a month ago,
yeah.
And I started my channel for one reason, because I seen how people were treating the Islam problem or the Muslim problem, especially with the refugees in Europe, and I've seen a lot of assumptions taken for being broadcasted by both sides, the right wings and the left wings, the feminists, the MRAs, the anti-feminists, and it seems like almost everybody's getting it wrong. You've got like a lot of nationalists and right-wingers going like, no, Islam is just it's just bad, and we need to abolish it, and all Muslims should be glassed and nuked back to the Stone Age. And I've seen a lot of feminists and liberals going like, no, Islam has done nothing wrong. No one seems to have the nuance of it, and I'm not saying that it's because their lack of effort. They're trying to understand it, but it has way more nuance than that. So I saw myself in a unique position because I'm an ex-Muslim atheist, lived most of my life in Saudi Arabia. I still live in Dubai, so I know a little bit more about the topic. I've been an activist for women's rights in Saudi for quite a few years. I stopped doing. I'm more of an advocate right now since I moved out 3 years ago. But I used to be an activist. Yes, I used to teach women how to drive, and I got arrested for it, and I wear that as a badge of honor. I was arrested for things that I believe in.
Well, actually, I do have a point to make while maybe Brian formulates a question from that comment.
That's fine.
The idea that women's limitations becomes men's obligations. In that context, women's limitations become. I mean, I've had people suggest that people who chauffeur, rich people get chauffeured. They have a choice not to. They could drive their car if they wanted to. However, in this particular concept of women's limitations becoming men's obligations, women's limitations become a currency that can compel service out of men.
Yeah, they don't have to pay their men to drive them around like they would have to pay a chauffeur, right?
But in order to maintain their limitations, they have to, maintain their limitations in order to use them as a currency to compel this kind of service out of men.
It's like they don't have to, if they were able to drive, then their husbands wouldn't have to do that, or their brothers or their sons wouldn't have to drive them around. And so they would actually have to pay for the service, or they would have to, do something, provide a service in return, or some sort of currency in return. Whereas as long as they are prevented from doing this by law, from driving themselves around, they can expect their husbands, brothers, sons, male relatives to do this for no charge whatsoever, just because they have to, right? So and it's justified because you are allowed to drive and I am not, and so therefore, yeah, So I mean, like it really is. It's a lot more complicated than people, I think, tend to realize. There are reasons why women would object to having this right, because the moment they have the right, they now have an obligation to take advantage of it.
Well, yeah, and they no longer can use their limitations as a form of currency to compel service out of men. They can't say, well, I can't drive myself, so you have to. I can't do this, so you have to do this. I can't support myself, so you have to support me. And in the context where a society can't really necessarily offer women a full ability to support themselves, at least in certain occupations, that may be more valuable to women than the freedom of being able to take whatever occupation you can. I mean, especially in a situation where the occupations are all very dangerous, very risky, very deadly. I doubt that our female ancestors were that stupid that they couldn't develop a way of negotiating a climate for themselves that they found beneficial. It's like it becomes women's limitations aren't just men's obligations, but they become a form of currency, a form of social currency. That when women have it, they don't need to go out and earn money to pay a chauffeur. They just have that limitation, and they can use their nearest. They can use it on their nearest male relative.
Right. I mean, it's understood that the woman has this power. Yet there's no paper behind it. There's nothing. There's nothing written in.
The answer is one word, to be honest. And I'm sure the ladies here would agree with me that when it comes to guilt, women can manipulate men's guilt very, very easily. When women in a whole society are so limited with their rights and with their mobility, and if the husband can't provide, because again we're kind of raised to believe that we're responsible for our women's happiness no matter what. If we can't make her happy, then she can manipulate that guilt. You failed as a man. I'm not happy with this. And that's a very powerful weapon.
That's soft power. It's soft power. It's not power that's written in. It's what Thomas Ball. I don't know if you know him. You could look him up later. But it's what Thomas Ball essentially called the second set of books. Right. We have this one set of books, which is all of the legal, written down things, right, that give power to men. Right. And then we have this second set of books, which is just kind of this informal social power of like, it's not written down, and so we can pretend it's not there, right? We can pretend that it doesn't exist and that men have all the power, right? But isn't the fact that there's that plausible deniability attached to it, doesn't that allow, I mean, can you imagine, right? Okay, because I was reading a blog post by, he's a university professor in Saudi Arabia, and he did an informal poll of his female students, 60 to 65% of whom were women, by the way, in Saudi Arabia, in that place that oppresses women and denies them an education. But he did an informal poll of them about the driving ban, and 80% of them said they didn't want the driving ban lifted because it made their men treat them like queens, and it obligated their men to do things for them, and it also prevented their men from having opportunities to cheat on them, and all kinds of other reasons. That all would make perfect sense to a woman. You know, to any given woman, it would make perfect sense that, okay, well, you know, I don't want my man to do this. I want my man to do things for me. All of these things, right? So this is what these women thought was the price that they had to pay in order to get all of that, right? The other 20%, it wasn't. They wanted the driving ban lifted, but it wasn't an unconditional thing. They wanted the driving ban lifted, but they wanted things like women-only lanes and stuff like that, right? And so essentially, what you have is a whole bunch of women, right, who are standing in the way of progress for women, of what you would see as progress for women, what I might see as progress for women, who are saying, no, we don't want this, right? Because what we get now is worth more to us than what we could get from having this greater freedom. And at least more, it's worth more to us, right? And, okay, so is this going to be another thing like women's suffrage in the West, where, you know, pretty much the same afternoon when women, you know, 51% of women finally agreed that, okay, yeah, we want the vote, that was the same afternoon it was signed into law and women were given the vote, right? And then for the next 100 years, men have their faces shoved into that dog shit of, you spent millennia denying women the vote, right? And women always wanted the vote, and women always wanted this freedom, and women always were subjugated, and you always had the power to liberate them, and you refused, and like there's this narrative that the whole suffrage thing was this battle of men in power against these powerless women, when in reality the majority of women didn't want the vote, and the moment the majority of women said, okay, yeah, actually we can see the point to having the vote, that was when men gave them the vote. And men were literally saying, there were men in British Parliament saying, I've never seen a situation where not only was it being demanded of me to give a right to a population that's completely indifferent to it, but demanded to give a right to a population that is, in the most part, in the vast majority, virulently oppositional to it. They don't want it. They've said they don't want it. They refuse to take. Am I going to force it on them, right? And yet the men are still the bad guys because they're the ones with the power on paper, and all of this women's power, right, is soft power. It's informal power. It's imbued with this plausible deniability, and yeah, no, in 20 minutes, 20 years, right, we're gonna the driving ban will be lifted, and men in Saudi Arabia will be blamed for banning women from driving all this time.
Well, I mean, it's I'm hearing.
Yeah, Karen had an echo. Go ahead, Habib.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's just like when I hear myself talking.
I know.
God damn it. I forgot what I was saying. Oh yeah. When it comes to driving ban, for example, it's a little bit different than the vote rights for women in the States, because the driving ban is not only held by men; it's held by religious clerics that say that the driving ban is Islamic, and most of the women that are against it, and most of the men that are against it, are taking it from not a societal point of view, but from a religious point of view. So when you come out against the ban, you immediately become, in their eyes, anti-Islamic. And that's another battle that we have to go through when we're trying to at least level the playing field when it comes between men and women. And sometimes it's not even like not even just men and women, even instating some basic human rights in the Middle East and in countries like Saudi Arabia, the first thing that we're going to get is like, you're anti-Islam. What are you talking about? Freedom of religion? This is the nation of Islam. We shouldn't have freedom of religion here.
I would agree with that. I would also, though, I would say that the vast majority of women who were protesting against suffrage essentially said that it was against God's natural order. It was against the roles that God had chosen for men and women. It was a lot of them were like, okay, we have enough shit to do. We don't need all of this other stuff that goes along with full citizenship. But a lot of the rhetoric against women's suffrage from women and from men had to do with the order that God had decreed as far as the roles of men and women. So I mean, like, because there's such a temporal difference, temporal expanse between where we are now and 100 years ago when women were agitating for the vote and there were women opposing it. I think all of those sort of religious connotations, all of those sort of it's the natural order, it's what God ordained, all of those things have been sort of erased from our history. But they were there. Being pro-suffrage, pro-women's suffrage was considered to be like spitting in the face of God. It was all of those things. So yeah, I think that there are more parallels than you might think. I mean, I'm sure you've heard the sanitized feminist version of the women's fight for suffrage in the West, and a lot of those nuances are gone now. They're not taught anymore. Yeah, well, I mean, like, I just, like, women in the West or feminists in the West, what feminists in the West want for women, like, they don't want that male guardian because, the male guardian can tell a woman what to do, what not to do, puts limitations on her freedom, right? I'm not available to escort you to the market right now, whatever, right? But what they seem to want is for all men to be their guardians, but to have no power to tell them what to do or not do, but with the same obligation to protect them, right? Yeah. So essentially, they want all of the safety that they get from having that male guardian escorting them everywhere publicly, right? But they don't want to have to pay the price of having to listen to their bodyguard, tell them, they don't want to have to duck when he says duck. They don't want to, go inside when he says go inside. It's not safe. They want to be able to have ultimate freedom and at the same time be completely safe in every single environment, no matter how dumb fuck their choices are, right? That just seems to be what feminists in the West want for women. And so, like, essentially, when you look at sort of the male guardian thing, and I do agree that because it's a huge burden to put on a man, to have to go escort somebody, anytime she wants to go to the market, anytime she wants to go out of the house, he's got to go with her. He's got to protect her, right? I would love to get rid of that. Okay, but what are we going to replace it with?
They want the state, is what they want. That's part of it.
Women are going to want something in its place. They are. They're not going to want it to just go away.
Yeah. And to be honest, like the safety thing is also something that men would like to pursue as well. The thing about women's rights in the Middle East, the reason they keep their women all inside and the reason they cover them from head to toe, they keep telling us, even I was taught that in school, like, yeah, women are very precious and we need to protect them, and that's their version of protection. It comes to the point where before you sign a marriage certificate, there's another agreement that you sign with your betrothed father. It's called al-milka, which is translated where, like, the literal translation of that is ownership. Pretty much that document says that the ownership of that woman is transferred from the father to the husband. And yes, in that document it says that, yeah, you have to protect them with all you have.
Yeah, no,
I don't like that because, again, I don't want to own someone and I want them to be a little bit responsible for their own safety. Yes, I would protect them if I can, but they need to be responsible for it as well.
Yeah. No, I think what what the West does with that sort of that idea of ownership, right? Is they take all of the negative connotations of that word, like you own something, right? Well, okay, my blog is called Owning Your Shit. I own my shit. That means I take responsibility for it. That doesn't mean I hoard it all to myself and refuse to allow it out of its cage, right? No, it just means I take responsibility for it. And when you look at the transferring ownership, well, that, okay, yeah, authority over, sure, right? You're transferring authority over that woman from the father to the husband, but you're also transferring responsibility for everything she needs in life, right?
Exactly.
From the father to the man, to the husband. And so it's like nobody wants to look at that other side. Nobody in the West, anyway, wants to look at what kind of burden that places on men. That there's not just a burden of that's being placed on the husband, right? But that this father's probably really happy to be relieved of that burden, right? Because it is a burden. It's a huge responsibility, right? And to have to be responsible for an adult human being as if you were responsible for a child, that's not okay to be sort of forced into that. So I think I agree with you. That needs to go, but it doesn't need to go because it oppresses women. It needs to go because it's unfair to both.
It's unfair to the entire society, not just women. Like I said, when I advocate for women's rights, it's rights and obligations as well. They need to have those obligations because, like I said, the sense of guilt between all men that can't provide as much as they want for their wives is staggering. So it's destroying a lot of families in the Middle East, and it's not pretty to watch.
Yeah.
And they're not even able to talk about it because even talking about it is seen as betrayal to their women, as a failure for them. Like they failed as men.
Yep.
And even if the woman is making 10 times more money than they do, they're not really going to ask her to start spending money on the family or on the household. I mean, there are a few liberal families here and there that do that, but that's not the status quo.
I mean, polygamy was essentially a system that was brought about to deal with women who could not find husbands, in times of conflict, when men were dying lots in warfare and stuff like this, and there just weren't enough men to look after the, so they would. These are measures that were brought in lots of different societies through history, essentially to deal with a culture that kills off its young men at astonishing rates, right? In order to deal with, how do we take care of these women? And, well, how do we put them to use engaging in the business of making new human beings? That was also part of it, I'm sure, right? So polygamy's never been the norm in European society, Western European society, so I guess they had to come up with bachelor taxes instead, I guess. But that's what they tried to do.
Well, we don't have any taxes in most of the Gulf countries here. No, wait. No, none of them have taxes. We don't have taxes in Saudi. We don't have them here in Dubai, Kuwait, Qatar. No taxes at all. So the tax system is very alien to me. But even social services, they're very, very few and far in between. If I were to speak from, and I know it's a little bit of a personal example, it doesn't really represent the norm, but I have an aunt. She's in her 30s now, still single, never got married, and she was left alone with my grandmother, who is pushing 85 now. She is very sick, turning blind, and they live in a small village, and she lives off charity. She would wish for the day, she would hope for the day where she could, have more autonomy and be able to drive around, get a job, and provide a decent life for her and her mother. And right now she lives out of just handouts from, her nephews and her nieces, and from charity from the community. If that is gone, then it's gone. She just sometimes she calls and she goes like, I haven't eaten in like 3 days. And I'm like, okay, I'll see what I can do. And to be honest, I haven't really been in touch with her since I moved out of Saudi, but yeah, it's a very sad situation. I don't know the statistics of how many people are living in the same conditions, but it does happen, and it happened to me personally, like, you know, with my aunt. And that's the kind of thing that I want to avoid from happening. And it's always a battle between this kind of example and women who are, you know, in middle class or upper middle class that are doing fine in today's system. They're like, yeah, we're happy with this as it is. And my reply to them was always the same. It's like, okay, if you want to live like this, it's fine. No one's going to stop you from having a chauffeur. No one's going to stop you from not having a job. But I want to give the option for those who need it. And that's all what I want to do.
I actually think that that's the absolute 100% right approach to take, and I think it's in conflict with how things happened in the West, because so much of the advocacy on you know, in terms of the suffragettes and all of that stuff, there really was this sort of big gap in the middle, the socioeconomic middle, right? So you had women at the very bottom and women at the very top who were agitating for more rights. The women at the very top, because they wanted to be a barrister, they wanted that high status like their husbands and their fathers, that they viewed as being like actual, you know, power over other people. And then you had the women at the bottom who just wanted to have some autonomy over their own lives and, you know, earn a reasonable wage because they did not have anybody that they could depend on to support them. And I think that a lot of the time those women at the top used the women at the bottom as sort of this like this ballast, you know, to get things done, right? And then ended up getting them done in a way that just was really, really excellent for the women at the top and maybe not so great for the women at the bottom. Like I said, Mary Harris Jones, who was advocating for the lowest of the lowest class, working class people who were really struggling, and she was fighting to keep, she was fighting for families. She wasn't just fighting for a woman's right to go out and get a factory job and be paid a decent amount. She was fighting for the rights of their husbands to, you know, not be exposed to danger on the job so that they could support their families and all of those things, right? She was very much fighting for family units. She was very much fighting for all of these for women's ability to contribute to their families financially, to contribute to their families in concrete ways, to contribute to society, all of those things, right? And then there was this just other layer at the top, the elitist layer that has sort of taken over, that has turned into the microaggression generation. That was all about the wage gap at the top, right? Women getting into, you know, there are not enough women CEOs. Well, you know, I think that a woman whose husband has been put in prison in the United States for a non-violent, victimless crime, right? I'm not sure she's really that concerned with the fact that she earns 12 cents an hour less than a man who works at the same place. She's more concerned with the fact that her husband is no longer contributing to their family, right? And not financially, not materially, not practically, not day to day, right? Those are the concerns that I would really love to see so much of the focus put on, and I'm really actually really glad that you're focusing on that it's not a matter of women having the right to drive, right? If they want to, if they feel like it, right? But it's a matter of there are women out there who need this, right? They need this just to survive because they don't have a chauffeur, they don't have a husband, they don't have a father, they don't have a son, right? They don't have brothers who can drive them around. And they have people that they have to take care of. And I think that was the approach of Mary Harris Jones that has not been the approach of the establishment feminism in the West, and it's just really nice to see that things, at least you, in a place like Saudi Arabia, are focusing on those kinds of things, because those are what really need to be focused on.
To be honest, when it comes to forced marriages, I think victims most of the time are the men, not the women. The tradition, at least in Saudi Arabia and in the Gulf countries, it kind of differs between countries and countries. But where I grew up, and most of Saudi Arabia, the family of the husband-to-be would approach the daughters or the wives, the wife-to-be's family, and be like, this is the boy, this is his accomplishment. It's like a CV kind of thing. Like, this is his resume. Would you accept him as a husband for your daughter? And then that family would discuss it with their daughter. Sometimes they would force her. They're like, well, this is a high status kind of guy. He's an engineer. He's a surgeon or something. Like, yeah, he's pretty rich. Go and marry him. But she still had a say. Now, it differs between family and family. Sometimes they listen to her, sometimes they don't. That's a different matter altogether. The guy, on the other hand, most of the time has no say whatsoever. Like, that's this girl for you, and that's it. Done.
Yeah, that's actually been my experience in terms of like, you know, even historically in the West, when you have these arranged marriages, and often it's, you know, sort of the marriage is contracted when the girl is 6 and the boy is 8 or whatever, right? And it's done to consolidate a political arrangement between the families, and neither of them really has a choice. The boy is just as much at the mercy of that decision. His consent is taken into account exactly as much as the girl's is, and you know, so essentially, what we've seen in terms of how these things are construed or how these things are portrayed in the West is that these things harm women, and women uniquely, and that women are forced into these arranged marriages. But yeah, no, men, the man, the groom, he's just got his pick, you know. He has all the power, he has all the say, and it's just like, what? No, that's not usually how it works. And it would be really, really lovely if we could have a better view of that. Yeah.
You know, it's harmful to the whole society, not just men and not just women. And what I hate about a lot of the activist movements, the ones that are loud on the internet, they try to genderify all issues. Like, oh, this is just for men, oh, this is just for women. And I'm sitting here going, like, it's not about the gender.
Let me ask you a question. Are there issues with, I genuinely do not know this. Are there issues with child abuse?
Within marriage?
Do kids get beaten? Like, how do you discipline children typically in these cultures?
They get beaten all the time. Actually, it's written in Islam that it's part of the Quran. Like, to discipline a child or to discipline your wife, beating is recommended.
And who normally beats the children? Is it the husband or the wife or both?
The father. It is the father's role to beat the child.
So it would seem what I'm getting right off the bat. Now, I mean, there's no evidence to prove this because we're just now talking about this, but we're looking at a cycle of violence then, because a man who would, a parent who would beat their children will essentially create children that will beat their children.
Well, yes, true,
right.
but I do want to actually sort of stress the idea of just you wait till your father gets home, because it is the mother who is in charge of the household and in charge of all of the relationships within the household. She's the one who has the power there, right? This is just another burden that she that she can offload onto her husband. The man doesn't come home and just, because he had a bad day necessarily, just freaking start beating his kids. No, his wife informs him at the door, here's transgression 1, 2, and 3 that this child did, right? And, you need to do something about it, right? You need to enforce this, the proper behavior in this child. Now you do it. So she's the one who actually has the majority of the sort of influence on teaching the child, what behavior is right and wrong, and showing them the way and reasoning with them, and spends the majority of the time with the child, right? The man is the one who has to come home and be the bad guy, right? He has to come home and be the enforcer, right? And
yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is she is the judge and the father takes the role of the executioner. And that happened in my family as well. So, been there.
Right.
So yeah, it doesn't really matter if it's the man doing the beating if he's doing it at the instruction of the mother, and with the full force of all of that social pressure and that religious pressure and all of those cultural forces essentially telling him, well, I have to do this because my wife says it's necessary. Yeah, no, that's just another burden that's being placed on the dad to take on the role of the big baddie, and I don't think that's fair either.
It's not fair. And you know what? I don't give a fuck about the father or the mother in this case. My concern is the child. No child should be beaten the way of some of the children being beaten in the Middle East. No one should get to that.
I don't think so either. I think it's a really awful thing. Having written about it in fiction, written about like people who have been forced to, by their people in power to do horrible things to other people. I do have some sympathy for the person who is the executioner, as opposed to the person who decides who gets executed. The judge, who's the one who's like, yeah, no, this head needs to roll. I do tend to have a little bit more sympathy for the person who's just in the role of making the head roll. The thing that we do need to be concentrating on is that there's a head rolling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And of course, children that are beaten a lot, they're going to grow up and they're going to find that behavior normal, and then they're more prone to do it to their wives or their husbands or their children.
It's not even a problem. Here's the thing, like, they avoid talking about one part of the issue, which is women beating men. They don't even talk about it. Society doesn't talk about it. No one knows the size of the problem in the Middle East. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. I just don't know the numbers. But when it comes to the other way around, it's kind of recommended.
Well, one of the interesting things that Murray Strauss, he was actually privy to a preliminary report by the UN. It was a multicultural study that was done on dating violence, not intimate partner like spousal violence, but dating violence among young people. Dog, I will fucking kill you. And
please don't. I love dogs.
It's driving me crazy. And anyhow, so you had this study, and it was a study of like something like 50 different countries, and the results for the first 4 countries came in. They were the first to come in, and he looked at them, and he was quite surprised because one of them was Namibia, and the other was Jordan, right? Like there were 2 countries that you would think were like really horrible places for women, and they found that dating violence was much more young men who were dating were much more likely to report being assaulted by the women that they were dating than the other way around. And and he was very, very much looking forward to seeing whether the results across these 50 or 60 different countries would replicate that, right? That in dating relationships, women were much more likely to assault their partners than men were. And when the full report came out, the questions pertaining to women's violence against men had been removed from the survey. They'd been removed from the study, right? So there was he was just like, I was really interested, so I looked into it, and when I looked into it, question 37 and 38 had been erased.
Damn.
Right? Yeah. So that's something to consider. That the violence is going on. It doesn't necessarily, let me put it this way again. Men have this power on paper. Women's power in this regard seems to be informal, seems to be tacit, seems to be understood but not codified. It seems to exist but has plausible deniability and all of these things, right? And so there's probably more going on than what is openly stated in the Quran.
Did he state anything about the statistics he did see?
He said that the statistics he saw from Namibia and from Jordan indicated that young women were more likely to physically assault their dating partners than the other way around.
Which is consistent around the world.
It is.
I mean, for the longest time, domestic violence in Saudi against women was quite legal. It was to the point where you could kill your wife and no one would live to deny it. Be like, she was disobedient, I killed her. And that would be okay under the eyes of the law until 2013. Now, what happened in 2013, a story came out of this woman that was a TV personality in Saudi Arabia, and she disappeared off the waves. Like, she just disappeared in 2004. And some pictures of her in the hospital leaked out. Her husband beat her so bad that her entire face was bruised like hell, and because she picked up a phone when she was not allowed to. And that broke into the media, and that set a chain of events that made a law against domestic violence become a thing in 2013.
So, but
it was because of that one damsel in distress.
Okay,
and
but
yeah,
fair
the
enough.
media is a very powerful thing. If she wasn't a member of the media, no one would care.
Okay, but here's the thing. So you're saying that this story came out, and that's what changed the law.
Yes.
So essentially, up to that point, they hadn't, like the Saudi society hadn't had the ability to rally behind an evocative story like that in order to change the law. So in other words, before that point, maybe the beating was considered more of an abstraction. Like they didn't actually have a female face to it. They just had whatever abstraction that they were, or social abstraction that they were creating. Like, because what I mean, would if that story had come out in 2005, would it have galvanized the community to be against domestic violence? If it had come out in 1995, how about like 85? Like, I mean, that's my point. Is this a society that responded to that image and was galvanized by that image to get rid of domestic violence? I mean, when did it suddenly completely change?
It changed because we had a victim, an actual victim. Even though, I remember even TV shows back in the 80s when I was a kid, there was always these soap operas that always had a female victim of domestic violence. It was always pushed by the media like, this is a bad thing, you guys need to do something about it. But nobody did, until we had a real victim being plastered all over the Western media and our local media, and people started waking up. They're like, oh shit, this is actually happening. It's not just like the movies. This is what's happening in real life, and it's much worse than the movies. And I think to move the people in Saudi, when it comes to male victims, we need another victim that makes it to the media as well. And well, it might be a little bit, this is my pessimistic kind of side, but yeah, society does need a meritor. Otherwise, we could just come here, we could sit here and talk about it all day long, but it's not going to move the people as much as one victim would if they make it to the media.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Actually, Brian, I really wanted to finish what my point was.
Okay, go ahead.
What I'm trying to get at is, specifically, and I noticed in the chat, they said that the rate of female on male domestic violence doesn't matter, doesn't change what the Quran considers acceptable. But it sort of does say something. If
the Quran says, if your wife is not entirely obedient, you can beat the shit out of her, right? But the people who are doing the majority of beating the shit out of their partners are women who have no such little thing in writing saying, oh yeah, you can beat the shit out of him if you want, okay? And not only that, but nobody's fucking talking about it. Nobody's objecting to it, right? Doesn't that tell you something about men and women, even in an Islamic country, even in a country where men have permission to beat their fucking partners? They do it less frequently than women do.
Well, yeah, and we got to find the statistics to back that up, but it does say something. It says that, and also what it's saying to me, and I know that everybody in the chat's going to just light up with, oh my God, apologia, but once you put that in writing like that, you essentially make a man responsible for the behavior of his wife. So if she's beating the crap out of him, he becomes responsible for that. Well, why? If she's impertinent, why haven't you punished her properly in order to bring her in line and make her submissive? And it's like, how the hell is he supposed to do that when he's caged with a wild animal? And I don't mean that. I mean that metaphorically, not a literal wild animal, but something he obviously has no ability to control. How is he supposed to? Is he supposed to, like, I don't know, ooze masculine miasma at her? Like, if he can't control her, he can't control her. But that whole statement makes it his responsibility to have done so. If she's impertinent, you need to beat her. But I can't beat her because she's beating me. And it's just it's a mess. It's a mess for both parties, is what I'm saying.
Can we just take the beating out of the equation here?
I would love that. What really frustrates me is this whole idea, right? This whole idea of like the rates of women's violence against their male partners is irrelevant when it comes to what's written in the Quran. Well, okay, it may be irrelevant when it comes to what's written in the Quran, but it is not irrelevant when it comes to men who are raised in Islamic cultures, because if men are less likely to beat their wives, then their wives are to beat them, despite the fact that it's legal to beat their wives, and their wives are required to be obedient to them.
It sort of makes you wonder what would happen if that wasn't there.
Yeah!
Yeah, I remember when I went into computer science, the majority of the women in computer science were either Asian or Middle Eastern in the West. And there were a few white women, but mostly it was, Asians or Middle Eastern women. So, I mean, and if you look at the statistics of the tests, I remember looking at the tests on mathematics coming out of the Middle East and Asia. There are places in the Middle East and Asia, and these highly patriarchal cultures, where girls are scoring higher on mathematics tests than boys.
What you're saying is, women in STEM needs more patriarchy.
Yeah, women in STEM needs more patriarchy. Yeah, but we could look at that and say, what are you doing right? And maybe one of the things that you're doing right is you're not promoting a narrative of fear in which women are eternal victims of society.
And now let's end this on a high note with Honey Badger Radio 54.
So at a university like Ryerson, you have to get approval from this, the student union to form your group. But in the United States, you don't normally have those kinds of things. You have some very basic rules that tend to apply to your student group. The only things that would apply in respect to gender would be like you can't actually bar, men or women from the group. But where the shady stuff would maybe come into play is whenever your organization tries to apply for funding, depending upon who heads up the student organization allocations committee. They could maybe try and get you that way, but nothing so blatant. And as what I've seen go on in some of these Canadian universities, it's just ridiculously blatant at a university like Ryerson.
Go ahead, Hannah.
Well, I was kind of thinking back to what Karen was saying earlier, and the whole deal with why they're rejecting these groups, deciding that misandry, using the word misandry, is anti-woman, and having men talk without basically feminist permission about men's issues. This is basically evidence that feminism is about hating men.
Got to a point where I needed to do something, and you know, I kept seeing how different universities were rejecting so many different groups, and I don't know, I just got frustrated, and I think, you know, it was it's my final year, and I felt like I needed to do something, and yeah, I think that was just the push I needed. I went to the Kathy Young event that was in Toronto earlier last year, and just, you know, I remember her saying that, you know, more people needed to do things, and I just thought, why not? So I made a Reddit post, and one thing led to another, and here we are.
Actually, that's awesome. You know, like it's really it's good to see people taking the initiative and just essentially saying, you know, like you're in your final year, and then you're gonna you just got one more freaking year. You got one more year to serve, right, of time, and then you're gonna be out of there, and to actually, like, you know, be able to say, okay, well, for that 1 year, I'm going to try and do something, because it's not like it's 4 years, right? It's just this 1 year that I'm going to try and build something, and then I'm going to be essentially out of here if I want to be, right? And I just really love to see people taking some initiative. I mean, like that they'll put up a video on YouTube. They'll write a blog post. They'll try to start a group. They'll just do something, and that's worth a whole lot. It really is.
Yeah, I would say don't worry about me. You know, our lawsuits being funded. We're recruiting. Well, we're trying to get situation going where we can come back next year, but obviously I won't be in the executive. It'll be someone else. You know, if you do go to Ryerson, please get in contact with me, because we are looking for someone to take up the flame next year. But if you're not near me, you know, don't worry about it. Just concentrate on your own cities, concentrate on your own neighborhoods, get men's issues groups going at your own universities, and if you could do that, then that would be the greatest help that you can do for me. But because it's not just for me, it's for this whole movement that's happening around men's issues. So yeah, that's what I would say.
There was a study done where they actually they went, I think it was in New York City, and they just picked random men off the street who were homeless and sleeping rough, and who were willing to do it, and put them in MRIs, gave them MRIs, and they found that over 60% of them had brain injuries. So these are not necessarily men who are just there because they're losers. They're there because they're disabled.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, it mostly started with me going with them to speak to their social workers, because they felt like they could talk to me and explain to me what was going on without feeling judged. And when I would listen to their problems, I would hear a lot of people with the same complaints about the same social workers. So I started just going with them, and in my head I was just being a translator, to be completely honest. I was translating from disenfranchised man to a wealthy social working woman. It kind of evolved from there. It got to the point where I was just so upset because these social workers didn't seem to care. There were some that did, and to their credit, there are some social workers out there who genuinely care about men's issues. They don't really speak about it around the office, though, because culturally, at least from what I've seen, it's either a very Christian or a very feminist group. I would set up my tent under a bridge across the street from what's called Waterfront Park. And people would come around and harass me sometimes. I mean, that's kind of what happens when you're living on the streets. Someone who thinks they're bigger and stronger than you will come around and try and take what's yours. But it was like there was always one guy watching my back, even if I didn't know they were there, because they would come out of the fucking woodwork, to be completely honest, to stand up for me. And I think it was just because I treated them like human beings. I was respectful, I was kind, loving in a familial way. And I would share with them if I had anything to share, so they tended to give me whatever they could give me, even if that was just setting up their tents around me for the night so I feel safe.
They get help from the public, they get help from services. And then as the result of this disregard of male suffering and male vulnerability and not being willing to take care of men when they are poor, and that leads to more men dying in poverty. And then feminists, I can't use another word, it's feminist usually.
It's like when they say, of course women in the Congo are uniquely oppressed. 80% of the people in refugee camps are women and girls. And then you ask them, why is that? What happened to the men and boys? Right? And then they start to actually think about it, right? You're literally calling a group of people oppressed because they survived when others died, right? That's what they're doing. Is the men and boys are all dead or forcibly conscripted. That's where they are, right? And the women and girls, 80% women and girls, they made it to the refugee camps. Right? And therefore, women are uniquely oppressed in that situation, right?
In the short term, I am trying to bring attention to the men's issues in the Seattle homeless population with all of the nonprofits. In the long term, I want to have enough video evidence to put together some presentations for the people who run the nonprofits around here and start making some genuine change to how homeless programs are run. Seattle sets a lot of the standard for innovation in social services. So if I can make the change here, I can get the change to grow elsewhere as well.
All right. And if someone is looking for more services or more info, where can they go?
If they're looking for more info, well, let's put it this way. If you're in need of services, go to desc.org or dial 211 in the United States. You will be able to find homeless services. If you're looking to help, go to desc.org and donate, because every dollar donated from an unknown source is getting attributed to me right now and giving me a lot of leeway with this nonprofit to make change.
Oh, that's
okay.
a good idea.
Yeah, that's a very good idea. Would it help if people mentioned in their donation that it's courtesy of CV?
Yes.
Okay, well, I will note that for future as well. So if you go to the address, which is again the desc.org, and you donate now, it's very easy to find because it's the only red thing on the or the red and the 2,000 homeless men and women look to DESC for help every day. But the donate now button is red in the very top. And if you want to donate, put it courtesy of CV, so that they know exactly where it came from.
You have somebody like the National Coalition for Men, who have been around for a very, very long time, and they rarely ever make the news. If they do, they're quoted. The quote is not some horrific, portrayal of a misogynistic hate group. It's just a brief quote, half a sentence of, we just don't believe it's right, or whatever, right? And then they move on and discuss the rest of the issue. But what they tend to do is they tend to do a lot of writing threatening letters in beautiful legalese to companies that are well, I mean, one of the ones Harry Crouch described to me was that he had one of their lawyers write to, I think it was Singapore Airlines, essentially telling them, we heard through the grapevine, and this is all in legalese, mind you, we heard through the grapevine that you asked some man to move from his seat because he was sitting next to an unaccompanied minor, and you were concerned that he was going to molest this child. Are you aware that doing that is in violation of UNRWA and could completely negate your right and your privilege of landing your planes in California? Are you aware of that? Right? Because you could be banned, you could be barred from doing business in California if you continue to do this. Do we really need to launch a lawsuit to stop you from engaging in this policy? Do we now? Right? And then they change their policy, right? And that's what NCFM tends to do a lot of. They don't make the headlines. They certainly don't get called rape apologists a whole lot. But they do provide a huge amount of that behind-the-scenes stuff that's so incredibly useful. It really is. It's like it's providing resources that people need to actually get real things done in the real world.
Can you give us a rundown of the sort of the average when a young man is accused of a sex, not a sex crime, not a sex, what is it? Misconduct.
Sexual
misconduct.
Violation.
Yeah. What can he expect if he's accused of sexual misconduct on his campus? And before we get into that, also, what is the is there any barrier for a woman to accuse a man of sexual misconduct on a college campus? Like, is there any what would she do to do that?
Well, as far as if there's any disincentive, as far as as a matter of education policy, in most schools they really don't have any policy against making a false accusation, or if they do, they really don't enforce it. And especially if you're at like a private liberal college or university, that's going to be especially bad because there tend to be a lot of, as you would call them, women's fear groups, or that really just reflexively take the woman's side no matter what, especially when there's been some kind of sex crime accusation. So there really isn't a lot of backlash in terms of formal policy that they would suffer. Although there have been like extremely rare cases where a woman was punished in the United States, but it's been so rare. And every time that it has happened, to my knowledge, there's just been a huge uproar. So there may be some isolated minor social ostracism, but I've never seen I've never heard of a woman dropping out of school in higher education because she got treated so badly because she made a false accusation. I've never heard of that.
Or you mean that she was actually not treated so badly, but that she made a false accusation and there was some redress for her victim to have her be punished for it. So what you're saying is there is none. There is basically no redress for people who are victims of false accusations in these college, I guess, tribunals or whatever you want to call them.
Consider that in terms of seeking actual Title IX redress for men and boys in academia, Title IX being the overarching federal law on gender equity in education in the United States, there really haven't been a lot of legal precedents. So what there have been a lot more legal precedents for are things like breach of contract, contract law, workplace law, and things like that. And so that's what a lot of the earlier cases really did deal with, because a lot of people in the legal community thought that pursuing a Title IX claim was just kind of it wasn't going to work. But over time, we've got more and more precedents, especially in the latter half of 2015, that really helped build stronger and stronger cases. And over time, originally the settlements were ridiculously small when people have gotten settlements, but they become bigger and bigger, and a lot of universities really are becoming rather arrogant and overconfident because the way they used to offset these types of lawsuits is is through insurance. Really, their insurance companies would pay for a lot of these things. But some of these universities are so arrogant that they assume that that they don't need to pay for whatever insurance package would otherwise pay for this specific type of charge. So they'll get hit for. They're increasingly getting hit recently for the full amount. We're actually up to like several hundreds of thousands of dollars for some of these settlements in 2016, and that's if you don't consider the Duke University settlement, which actually is according to my sources in the tens of millions. But that was a very unique case, which is not like the majority of our cases out here.
It's just, I find this astounding. I don't even know what the purpose of this is. To give one group of people the carte blanche right to essentially eject another group of people from the educational institutions, and then excuse that, giving them carte blanche, basically, excuse it by saying, oh no, they'll never lie. What, are they not human?
Yeah.
Like,
well,
do they not have human emotions, like desire for revenge or anger, jealousy? Like, people do all kinds of crazy stuff because we're human.
well, the law does not say that this is what universities are supposed to do. If you're talking about policy, then yes, but a lot of people would, and I think correctly, argue that the policy was illegally created. So if you take a look at how the Dear Colleague letter was created, it was really a kind of behind closed doors type of deal. Whenever a new policy, especially one that affects thousands of higher ed institutions, whenever a new policy is put forth with the possibility of being mandated, there's a period of public comment and review. That just didn't happen with this. It was just drafted, and passed in the still of the night, and then after that, it was just in out of the blue one day, it just rammed down everyone's throats. So I say we. I'm in constant communication with a lot of attorneys, as well as various other advocacy groups like FACE, which was founded by mothers of wrongly accused sons, families advocating campus equality, as well as SAVE, Stop Abusive and Violent Environments. They're actually making...
FACE, I just want to say Judith Grossman was one of the founding members of FACE.
The Campus Sexual Violence Elimination Act changed the wording of the Higher Education Act of 1965 by adding stipulations requiring colleges to substitute college disciplinary boards for courtrooms in cases of allegations of sexual misconduct. What it basically did was it took the text of the Dear Colleague letter, put it into a section of the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act of I believe it was 2012 or 2014, and it took effect in March of 2014. And I actually wrote about this when it happened, after it had been passed, but before it had been taken effect, or before it had taken effect. I got an article on it on A Voice for Men.
Okay.
Called the Campus False Accuser Support Act, because that's basically what it is. It's the Campus False Accuser Support Act, and they kind of hid it in the Violence Against Women Reauthorization Act. So it never was discussed publicly. Nobody actually came out and said, "Hey, we're going to make this law. We're gonna mandate legally that universities do this." They simply put it in. To something that was going to, it was almost a guarantee that was going to get passed one way or another.
Are you saying they
Republicans just sort of fought over small details of how it was going to be written?
Are you saying they just took it out and then they slipped it in?
Yeah, they basically raped the legal process. No consent, no discussion,
no affirmative consent required.
Just the tip, Karen. Just the tip.
Just the tip.
Like I said, this was passed, behind closed doors, drafted in the still of the night. I do wonder what other groups, had a hand in creating it.
True. It could have been right from the Oval Office itself.
Maybe, I don't know. But the fun thing about this is the more you challenge it, the more people start to come out of the woodwork. and I think we'll see some interesting things before long. So
definitely.
All right. Well, you know that they're starting in Australia to have a similar system for family courts, or advocating for a similar system for family courts as they have for college men accused of sexual misconduct. So we can look forward to that.
Oh, great.
Oh, no, in Canada here, after the debacle of the Jian Ghomeshi trial, we actually have a veteran prosecutor named David Butt, and with 2 T's, who is advocating along with several women's groups for a something called a restorative justice model for sexual assault cases. To remove them from criminal courts, they'd still be considered crimes, and a conviction would still be a criminal conviction, but it just wouldn't have the same due process barriers and obstacles, and the same innocent until proven guilty difficulties, and it wouldn't have all of that, admissibility of evidence and credibility of witnesses stuff to have to deal with. Right, and so it just would be so much easier to convict people of this egregious crime if we just did away with all of that stuff and just put all of these sexual assault cases through a parallel system of justice where a conviction would have the same social weight, right, and mean the same social death for somebody, but it just really wouldn't take as much to get us there.
We hope you enjoyed this clip show. If there was a clip from these shows that you think we should have shown, please leave a comment on the video and include a timestamp. Thank you, and Badger on.